will crash. And it'll reopen it and it'll be there, but you'll have to go through the crash and restart thing.
Okay,
Hey,
let's go ahead and get
everybody.
started. Mr. Bernstein.
Hi, it's Sunday, November 10th. This is Tinderbox Meetup with Michael Becker and Mark Bernstein, the designer of Tinderbox. And last week we talked about JSON parsing, and I think this week we may be talking about JSON parsing some more, but we shall see, in addition to our usual problems and uh, conundrums. And so here's Michael Becker.
Hey, everybody. I'm Go Niners this morning. Got my 49er shirt on today, so excited about the game. So let's just jump right in. So we're going to go around the room. Typically, the way we run these formats is new people introduce themselves. Don't see anybody new today. We then will jump into a theme if we have one. And then, as Mark pointed out, we'll go through various topics. So we do have a theme as raised by Paul Christie last week, in that can we play with the JSON parsing script a little bit more this morning and just familiarize ourselves a little bit more with that. So we certainly can. And then there were a couple things that came up from the forum this week. One was Fidel had a really interesting question about how to create reductionist lists, which we think we came up with a creative answer for. Plus, we had one of our members wanted to talk about some linking strategies for again, and both had to do with creating scenes for screenplays. They're trying to keep track of how they're relating with the characters, so we can play with that. And then and I was going to show my unlinking code, but I accidentally deleted it right before the call, so I'm going to have to rewrite it all. So as Mr. Anderson laughs, yeah. So maybe or maybe not, we can get to that. So let's jump in and let's go around the room. Anybody has any comments, questions, projects they're working on? Let me take some notes here while we're at it. Mr. Rogers, you had a comment earlier this week. Did that get cleared
No,
up?
I'll do the guard Boolean thing. I think I can. I haven't looked at it yet, but I think that's pretty straightforward. So I'll jump in the forum if I have a problem.
You want to just since I brought it up on you, you want to explain what the issue was? I don't remember exactly.
So I use a trackpad. Oh, you can't see that. There you go. And occasionally when I'm mousing around, I will accidentally do a two-finger grab of a note in a container and drag it down to become a child of one of its siblings. And when I notice that, then I drag it back up to its proper location, and OnAdd does its thing in the container, and it alters all the attributes that are set by OnAdd. And that's undesired. So undo doesn't undo that, and moving it back into the thing doesn't fix it. So I could copy them from the exported file. That's what I've done, and put them back in there. But the way to avoid that is to create a Boolean that indicates whether or not that note has already been processed. And so all of your OnAdd actions only take place if that Boolean is false or true, depending on how you set up the comparison.
They're actually there. Did you see my post on now? I remember. I'm glad we brought it back up. Did you see my post on that? There's an alternative way to do that other than a Boolean.
Yeah, I saw your post was you'd mentioned that you had discussed it before, and that there were other videos and stuff, but I didn't. But Mark's preceded yours, and that was the light bulb that said, yeah, I can just do that. So I didn't
Got it.
pursue yours. So
Well, actually, I did, but I did give a note, so maybe you skipped it after the note. So let me demonstrate that really quick,
okay.
because I did make a comment on how to do it. So let me show you how that works. Let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll reproduce what your experience that you're having, and then we'll show everybody what to do. All right. So, sorry, does everyone see my screen? Yeah. Can you see my box? Yes, no?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I need somebody to say yes because I can't see you now. Okay, so the problem you
Yeah.
were experiencing was this. So let's say, let me reproduce it real quick and we'll show you, because this is a really cool
Well, in the
solution. So let's say,
context, I'm in the outline view too. So
yeah, I'm going to outline review right now. It doesn't really matter because on ads are the same way, but let's say we've got P notes and we'll create, let me minimize you guys here so I can't view anybody. So we'll say like an on ad, and we'll create the on ad. We'll say, so here's this, we'll reproduce it and then we'll show you. So prototype equals keynote. And why don't we go ahead and say like, just for fun, type equals note. So we'll do two attributes like this, and we'll go ahead and create a type attribute too, just for fun. Okay, so we have this note here, and actually I don't want to do it there. I want to do it in a folder. So let's say we've got a P folder and the on ad. And the folder is this, and just to make the visual easier to see, we've got a folder and we've got, come on, we've got a note. We don't need the on ad here. All right, so let's say we've got a folder like here, and we'll go up and we'll call this one notes folder. And we'll call this one other folder. Okay, so we've created our two attributes. We're going to assign both of these the other folder, and on this, and then we'll call this one the person folder. That will work. And we'll say this one is going to be P. It's going to be person. And we'll go through Mark's comment too, but this is probably the easier way to do it. So let's say you had a note here, and we're going to call it, this is a note. And we'll have one here. This is Dave Rogers. Okay, and so and we'll go ahead and we'll add the type there. Right, so you'll see that we've got type person and we have type note. And if I move Dave Rogers up here, you'll see that Dave Rogers becomes a note and the type changes to type. And that's the problem you're experiencing, correct?
Similar,
Dave, I can't see you.
not in that context, but yeah, very similar.
Okay, so but the point being is the prototype was getting changed and the values of the prototypes were getting changed when you move them between folders that are notes that had on added to them.
And more generally, attributes are changing. Mine did not relate to prototype issues. It was just the attribute.
But remember, so again, type right here is an attribute, and
Correct.
so I'm changing the value of the attribute. And remember, prototype is an attribute too.
That's what I'm saying. More generally, what's happening is attributes are changing. It's not specifically related to prototypes.
No, but my point being is a prototype is an attribute. So I get how I think that's an important distinction to make too. So let's create another attribute. So we have here, call this one term, and maybe the term here is just to demonstrate it. And just to visualize that too, we'll add prototype here as well. Because just to reinforce the point that a prototype is nothing but an attribute. Right? And we'll up here. We'll call this one. Whoops. Sorry. We'll add this one. We'll call this term here too. Okay. And so, and let's say now on here one, we're going to put in a term like privacy and identity. And we'll call it, this won't be like cool dude. Okay. So we've got attributes that have values, and these values could be any number of different things. My speed is breaking. Okay, it could be any number of things. And so the issue is when I'm moving this around, right? So you'll see here right now, this note's attributes are person, cool dude, and the prototype value of person is its attribute value. And when I'm moving that into another container, the onAdd function is doing exactly what we're telling it to do, changing the note, cool dude, and actually that's interesting. It's not dealing with term, and then p note. So that's how we're going back and forth with those. So the way to protect that from changing is you use a pipe function. And so if you go in here and you type a pipe in front of the equals sign, what this is essentially saying, do this operation in question is default is blank. And if it's not, then it has a value, then don't change it. So by putting in that those pipe functions, we'll have to do it these two because they're now inherited. Okay. So put these pipe functions. So now you'll see when I move Dave Rogers to that, it doesn't change. And that's put in the pipe function which says, if it if it's defaulted blank, then change it. If not, then don't. That's what that pipe is saying. Does that make sense? And anybody, God, I've got too many files open here. Does that make here we go on tunnels? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I can't see you, so if you're nodding your heads or anything, you need to talk to me.
No, I get it. I'm not sure which is preferable. I suspect just I mean, my first impression is that rather than make each line of the action code that pipe equals terminology is just to enclose the whole onAdd action in curly brackets and put a test in there, with the guard boolean. But I don't know. Both ways obviously work, but in my case, it was not so much I was moving it between containers. It's just I would accidentally drag a sibling and made it a child of another sibling, which is fine. Nothing changes in the attributes at that point. But when I moved it back to its correct sibling order, then onAdd would fire and change the weather and the data creation and all the other attributes. So I just needed to check and make sure that it hasn't already done all that stuff. So it won't do it again. And I also need
Okay,
to
are
be
you sure? Maybe you can demonstrate. Are you sure it's an onAdd that's triggering that, or is that some kind of function that you're, or other list of action code like weather and all of that you're changing?
No, I know it's onAdd. I mean,
No,
that's what
all
onAdd
that is
does.
Okay.
perfectly plausible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
that it does
Yeah.
exactly what onAdd tells it to do. Once it's put in there, it just
Right.
changes all.
So
I've got a suggestion for a kind of a test that I've never really thought about. But suppose you want that onAdd that sets all the attributes to be for newly created notes and not for other notes. You could enclose all the actions in a test for if this note is more than 10 minutes old. And so, like, new notes, even if you make them in the wrong place and drag them in, they get all their default attributes set up by the onAdd action. But if the note has been left in the sun to dry, it's the shape it's going to be.
Yeah, there's a number of different approaches, and depending on your context, one may be better than the other in terms of maintaining the document over long term, the types of errors you're likely to encounter. What was interesting to me is that we have this feature undo has been in existence since graphical user probably preceding that in the text-based word processors. So we have this anticipation that if you do something, you can just go control open Apple Z or whatever and undo it. But in Tinderboxes, context that doesn't marry up with past experience. It behaves somewhat differently. And and when you make an error by using the graphical user interface, you're inclined to use the graphical user interface to correct the error, which then invoked the on add action. So I don't know what would have happened had and I haven't tested this, and it's on my back burner to try it, had I just did undo immediately after noticing that the note was in the wrong place. I suspect it would not. When I tried to undo, it said undo select note or something, which was not a familiar term. I didn't know what that was going to do, and I don't know how many levels of undo exist. So I haven't explored that either. So better not to make the error in the first place. Guard against the error in the first place than to rely on undo.
It's probably worth saying just an underlying thing
All
about
right.
on add, which is often overlooked, is it fires once and once only when a note is added to a container. So that leads to a background assumption that perhaps is worth drawing out, is that you assume that you're going to add a document once and once only to a container. Now, of course, as Dave said, when as we easily do make these sort of mistakes, especially with modern haptic sort of tools, it's quite easy to drag when you mean to just click. Then you get into the scenario where you mistakenly file something again, which you know were never intended to reuse. So what we're sort of guarding against, and there are, as been discussed already, a number of ways to doing this, is just, okay, well, how can you guard against that? So the idea of an odd add checking that it doesn't need to redo something already done is probably a fairly simple and fairly persistent guard against that sort of accidental retriggering.
Yeah, and the context is that presumably the notes in this blog, or if you were doing a journal or something like that, where you're recording events or thoughts in a chronological format, that bit of metadata becomes canonical, presumably at time of creation, and then if you're accidentally changing it, then that value goes away. So, and it's just chaos, you know.
All right. Got it. I do want to, okay, we can continue down this little path, but I do think there's some confusion, Dave, in the way you were wording it when you were talking about moving a note between a sibling and a child. And I don't see how that was any different than the way I was demonstrating it. And so I'm wondering what the confusion in the language is.
Well, you were referring to prototypes, and nothing I was doing had really much to do with prototypes. It was just a matter of a note accidentally became a child of of one of its siblings, and there was no on add action in that child in that sibling. So all the attributes were correct. It was just if I tried to export it, it would not export correctly. So I had to put it back into its correct sibling location. And once I do put it in that container, it then on add fires and changes all of the attributes, the date of the post, the time.
Correct, because that container has an on add, or that note has an on add. So when you're putting it back, it has an on add. So that's pretty much the same thing that we just discussed. I think the most important thing I want to try to convey right now is there seems to be this confusion when you're saying, well, I wasn't working with prototypes, and therefore this situation is different. And the point that I want to
no, excuse me. Let me try and be clear. I was trying to make the case in your example that the more general case is that it was changing attributes, that the prototype was a distraction. Prototype was not relevant to the discussion as an attribute.
But this is the point that I'm trying to make, right? And I think this is a really important distinction.
We're in violent
prototypes agreement. But prototypes is an attribute.
I know.
And I think that's it's the value. It's the value of an attribute. So when you're saying I'm trying to make a distinction between attributes and prototypes, I don't understand that distinction because prototypes
Well,
are
okay.
attributes in the
Let me
context
say
of
this.
the changing of values.
I will end it for this. A prototype is a unique attribute in that it other nodes inherit its properties. Okay, that isn't what I was concerned about. And when you say prototypes, people think about inheritance and all this stuff. And you were moving between two separate containers. This was just a sibling being dragged accidentally beneath a sibling and becoming a child, and then having to go back up. And it was just the attributes within that. Within none of the prototypes needed to change. In fact, none of the prototypes changed. So prototypes was just more of I miss a bit of a red herring in that context. So yes, a prototype is an attribute. Everything in Tinderbox is an attribute. Everything is an attribute. So the only thing I guess that it may not be an attribute is the structure. But so yeah, I get it. I was just pointing out that people shouldn't get distracted by prototypes. And now I'll shut up.
Okay. All right. So anybody else want to have what other topics does anybody else have? Mr. Bruce.
I'll come up to the blackboard. So I know that Tinderbox is not a mail merge program. And I know that through action code and other things, you can insert your attributes. I'm working on a project right now where I have a lot of different test scores. So we have a key value situation, if you will, aggression 88. And I would love to be able to insert that separately for different clients, or not different clients, different raters, in this case for a single client, to be able to insert that information under different notes. So then I can use Tinderbox to help build my report. Does that make sense so far? Reason. And so what I'm
No, I'm
wondering,
lost. Sorry. Can you say it again?
Well, think of it, pretend it is mail merge. So imagine we'll talk in my world. I have a spreadsheet and I have column A and column B. So column A is the list of what the labels are, and column B is the data or the the values. I want to be able to take those values and insert them into different notes depending upon who the rater was. So each rater would have their list of, for example, attributes, rater 1, aggression 88, rater 2, aggression 41. And I'd like to be able to insert that information for different raters, but I don't really want to, if I have to export it, that's fine. But what I'd love to be able to do is to just have it there, appear in text, move to preview, copy preview manually, bring it over to the part of the report that I want it to go into.
Okay,
Is
I think
that something
there's a
that
couple ways to
is
do it, but it is.
okay?
It's easily done, and there's a lot of ways to do that. But let's open up a Tinderbox file, and we will
But we probably
model
want to do that
the.
at Bruce level,
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. So let's open up a blank file,
not Dave level, Bruce level.
and got it. So so here's a blank file, and you have. So you have a rater, and let's just create a prototype just to make it easier. I'll go to outline real quick, and they're called ratings. You saying?
Well, yeah, I have a series of I have a test among
Right.
multiple raters, and it's important to put this information within text, and I'd like to automate some of it.
Right. So, but the point being is you have like a rating, and that rating's a number, like 88,
Yeah,
72.
these are T-scores.
All
T-scores
right.
have statistical
So
values, so yes.
okay. So why don't we just call it? No, so we'll call it T-score. Just
Well, but there's going to be different ratings. So there's 3 of them. One is social
okay.
problems, one is aggression, for example, and one has a score of 80 and the other has a score of 50.
So social problems, aggression, and is there a third one?
Well, there's 20 of them, but what if we just go with 2?
All right. So we got 2, and I'm going to create those as numbers, not date. Okay. So we have 2 numbers, and that's a rating. And maybe we call it rater, rater, so it's a person. And then we'll say, and we don't like,
And then
I
we
don't
have
like
teacher
doing
1 and
things on
teacher
root.
2.
So. Okay, so this is the teacher, and they're giving the ratings.
Teacher 1 has a rating of aggression and social problems of say 80 and 50. Teacher 2 has the
So this
opposite
is the
rating.
teacher. Got it. So let's do this. All right, and we'll go up here and let's play the on ad game just so we can do this really quick. So I'll send you this sample file when we're done. On ad. So the more we can automate, the better. Prototype equals P, and we'll do our piping so we learn that lesson. Equals P teacher. And we'll just pull it out, P teacher rating. And we'll change this to P teacher rating. Okay. I'll create a new folder called teacher ratings. And up there, we say like this stuff in the top, put our folder in, and now we're going to have our own. Let's give this one we don't need person anymore. We'll give that one a little so we go like that. All right. And the first teacher is going to be Dave Rogers. And Dave Rogers is saying what's the score? Like
Say give it an 80.
All right. And what's the aggression level?
55.
Both 55. Okay. And we'll say Art Firm. And what's Art gonna be doing?
Aggression will say 50.
Okay.
Or social problems 50. Sorry.
All right. And aggression?
Aggression 75.
Okay. So one of the simplest ways to go about doing it in this context is you could play with preview and do all of that. But in our last release, Mark gave us table. So you can just go here and
Before
select
you
the
go
table.
Okay. But that's not exactly what I'm trying to do unless it goes elsewhere. I want to insert it into the text. So Dave Rogers found that Dave Rogers and then another person found that this student was X, and then in parens I put aggression equals the number for each teacher. And what I'm trying to do is automate the rating, for example, aggression and the values for those teachers. Or I would say the results were mixed. So I don't want to create a table.
Okay, so let's create another note, and you can type for me the output, desired output. Right. So what do you want the desired output to look? You want Dave? Let's type it out so we see what it is.
The results for aggression were mixed. That would be the statement.
All right.
And then it's going to show and then I want to be able to show Dave Rogers' aggression score, Art's aggression rating of aggression.
Dave Rogers, and then you would go like this, and whatever that number was, and Art Firm, and whatever that number was, like that.
Almost the parens, but it would be a sentence. So the Dave Rogers and Art would be in parens, but this is fine. This is workable.
No, but let's try to build it up so we can automate your template a bit. Like,
all right,
what would you actually say?
Remove the period after mixed, and then open. I don't care if it's a bracket, a parens, a curly, and anything. And then the data is going to be contained within those left opening and closing brackets or parens.
Like that?
Yes.
Okay. So let's do that. Okay.
So will it populate the name as well? Can I populate the name as well?
Yes. Okay. So let's go start output. God, my fingers are off.
Because where I'm
So
really going with
in other
this,
words, you're going to have two report. So in other words, you're going to have another report that would be for social problems.
that'll be, yes, I'll treat that in a different paragraph.
You treat that in a different paragraph, correct?
Yes.
So let's look at that. So let's like go aggression,
But it's okay with me if
and
we
then
just
we'll
do one.
have
If I
social
see
problem.
how to do it with one, I
Okay.
can
And
replicate
then
it.
we'll copy it. No, but it's easy. It's easy. I know, but it's easier to do it this way. I can show you how to do it. So the regression, the result for the aggression, or mixed Dave Rogers this, and there's social problems for.
I saw Mark's comment.
I'm not seeing the comments.
That's okay.
So
That's okay. It's it's pithy.
so okay, got it. So are you saying that's the desired? Ultimately, this is the desired output you want. Something like that, correct?
Go to the top one. I think you had it. Yes. Well, the word interesting. So the word mixed almost would be Boolean. Where I'm trying to go with this is these scores, of course, have meaning, and a score 70 or above is what's
Mm-hmm.
called in the clinical range. So I might want to have the word mixed if one score is above the clinical range and another is below, and I might have the score aligned. I might want to have the word aligned and in the clinical range if both scores are above. But that's
So mixed is, yeah, and that's something I'm just going to put it here, and you can tell me that later. But that's something we can actually create as well, and that it could actually look at the numbers that you're getting and automatically change that number. But for now, let's work on getting the right values in here.
no,
If
this
that's
is
okay.
fine.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we'll go and create a template. Okay, and let's play around with, and before we get into the templating, what we can also do is sorry. What we can also do is first, and this is where you can play with some logging. So this is a great example of how to do this as well. So let's go ahead
Was
and
that the
create a
attribute
log here.
browser
So we'll
that you
just,
just?
no, that was my Zotero throwing up a BibTeX error.
Never mind.
I've got 20 different applications running right now, so stuff's happening in the background. Okay, so at the end of the day, let's pull up a stamp in this file, and we'll create a stamp, and we're going to go collect. Call this one collect aggression scores. All right, so we want to collect the aggression scores, and what we want to do is get the names of. And so, and again, so Mark and I have been playing with this week. So, writing out what you want to get done is really helpful. So you want to say, pull teacher names and their aggression score. So that's what we're trying to get, and then put them and put them into a sentence. So what we want to do, if that's
Do
what
I
we
need a
want, we're going to
different
say
stamp? Do I need a different stamp, Michael, for each score, for each category?
There might be a ways to automate that and combine them all into one, but for now, let's just do one first, and then we'll see what we get.
Okay.
Okay. So what we're going to do is so the first thing we need to do is we need to get a list, right? So we'll say vlist, and that list is going to be collect the children. And I'm going to come back to something in a minute. And what we want there is their ID numbers, right? So we're going to go get us the children of, and again, and here's the thing, we know all of our teacher ratings are in this note. And so what I'm going to do is grab its ID number. And so what we're saying is let's go get me the children. And this is where this kind of logging stuff really helps. So go get me the children of the note of this note teacher ratings, or to make it easier because we don't know how to play with ID numbers. Let's do this. Teacher ratings. So go collect the children of the teacher ratings and grab me their ID numbers. And then what I want to do when you're doing this kind of testing, you want to then do the text. This is a good kind of standard to get yourself into. Text of the note log equals blist, just so we can see what we get. So if I hit apply now, we can go look at the log note and you'll see that I've got an error. What did I do wrong here? blist, select children. Let's get rid of just that for now and see what happens. Okay, so you see I have 2 ID numbers, right? So that so I basically have gotten the ID numbers of these 2 notes here. Does that make sense
And
so
so
far?
as I'm and so I could use ID numbers, name, or path.
You could, and I'm using ID numbers for a specific reason. I'll show you why in just a second. So to validate that, you can just see if I look here on my logging 2221 222, and so you can see 221 222. So this is a way of how to test. So I now know that I've just captured the right notes that I want to get, these 2 ID numbers. So that, and I've verified that with my log. And so now what I want to do is I now want to create some output for myself. So I'm also going to now create a string. And we'll give you this file when we're done, so you have it. So we're going to create a string variable. And now what we're going to do is, what do we want to have in that string? Well, you told me we want to have their name and we want to have their output. So what we now want to do is what's called an each list operator for the list. So we say vlist.each. We'll call it a rating, just to make, or input rating. We'll use an I for input rating. Okay. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to run an each list operator. We're saying for each of the notes, go get me this information. And what do I want from the information? I want v string to be equal to the name of the note from iRating plus a space plus and the, what did we call it? Aggression. Right. So what that's saying is, okay. So what we're doing here is we're saying, go get me the list of the names, and build me a string, and we want to put and we'll do it from what we learned last week too. We'll say if iRating dot last, if iRating equals blist dot last, then, and we'll explain what we're doing in just a minute, because you want a comma separated list. So this is why we're having to do this. Else, and then we'll walk through this all again once we've done it. And if anybody's rolling their, okay. And so if it's the last one, then do this. Otherwise, we want you to put a space and a comma there. And then for the testing of our output using this stamp, let's just output this to text. And we'll walk through this one by one as we do it. The string. Okay. So what this stamp is saying is, create me a list and go get the list of the children of the note that I happen to have selected on, and it grab its IDs. Then, and we did this log and we validated that's true. So we're going to go ahead and comment that out for now. And then we say, now go with each of those items in that list. I want you to validate if it's the last item or not. And if it's not, that's the else statement down here. Give me the name of the person their aggression score and put a comma. And if it is the last item, then give me, and let's put one more teacher just to demonstrate the value of that. We'll say Mark Anderson. We'll say 40, 70. Right. And so now let's output the values there. So we hit apply. Oh, sorry. Make text. I thought I was in an export template. Sorry. My brain got off. Text equals vstring. Okay. And we got the wrong. So we're getting 0. So we got the I got the wrong. Did I spell aggression wrong? Oh, I know what I did wrong. What I did wrong here is I didn't put the designator of which note I want it to be taken from.
Oh, that was
So
part of my
like that.
confusion. So that's helpful.
Yeah. So we go like that. There you go. And now if we build a template, we can then insert that into the template. So that would be the next step if we can try doing that. But before we move on to that, and then to create your one for your other one, you can do, we'll create another one. We'll call this one social. Social problem.
Wait, how did you copy it?
Just a little
Oh, never.
plus button right
Oh,
there.
and then you just paste it in. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Okay. And the only value we're changing here is social problems.
And notice you've got social problems. You've got a typo in the original note. So either way, you have a G instead of a B.
Let me go. All right, let me fix this. Social. Now, tell me, where do I have the problem when you say the original note?
Right
Up
there.
here. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Well, that doesn't matter. Okay.
No. Okay. Because now we're just testing our code right now. So now I'm applying the social problem one, and if we do that, you'll see now I'm getting their social problems. Aggressions. Social problems.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to do.
Does that make sense? So now let's construct this template really quick, and so we can get this into here. So what we'll do is we'll create a template, and we'll call it. We'll just change this one. I'll just create a new one. We'll call it T ratings. This is where I want to play with. I don't want to overcomplicate this because I'm of the ilk that I really like automating all of it as much as possible. But let's do that step by step. So the first thing is we have, and remember, we can make this word whatever we want down the road. But our general model is going to be something like this. The results of the aggression were, and then you're wanting to input this value there, and based on the numbers, we can actually automate what word gets put in there. But really, what you're trying to do is get a value.
Well, I'm not so interested in automating it right now because I have to think that through and think about what the different descriptors
Sure.
would be.
Mhm.
So just
Right.
having, frankly, just having the scores line up, because we're dealing with a couple of hundred scores here across raters, and I would
Mhm.
love and the likelihood of making a single error as much as we double check. That's why I want to put it in Tinderbox, so I have ways of being able to look at it as a table, look at it in different ways to compare and make certain. So where you've
Right.
gone so far for my purposes is actually okay. I just want to make sure I
Okay.
can get it out. And other than the preview, is there do I need to use export? Or can
Well,
I
I
just
mean, right
have
now we've
preview?
just done a stamp. Right now we've just done stamps and we've dumped them into the text log. And so
Right.
what we could do, there's again, you could use attribute browser to get it out. You could use table view to get it out. You could use preview to get it out if you wanted to, modifying the output a little bit.
So I see Mark has a comment. Mark B.
And then if you wanted to, okay, again, I can't see anybody, so go ahead, Mark B, go for it.
Yeah, let me briefly share my screen.
Please.
And gotta get, there we go, the meetup window. So here we have a window where I did this wrong, but now I fixed it. I've got Mark with an aggression of 25 and Anne with an aggression of 75. And I want to write a report where we comment about the range of aggression.
Oh, sure. We could use the expression that way too. Yeah.
Okay. And I'm supposing we want to do this in our note. We're not interested in preview. We don't want to do templates at all. We can still do it. What we do is we go up to the edit menu and we insert an expression, which gives you a box embedded in the text. And you click on that box and you say something like,
And Mark, can you share your whole screen because we're not getting the extra,
yeah, okay.
extra.
Just a second.
We're not seeing the menus or the pop-up.
You're
pop-up
right.
boxes.
You're not seeing the menus. Share desktop 2. There we go. That should be better. You see the screen with this report here.
Yes. See the whole thing now.
Very good. Go up, insert expression from the edit menu. You click on the expression and you type an expression, which might be the aggression for the note. And now you have a boxed element which shows you that value, which lets you do it without having to have any recourse to export or worrying about that, which sometimes is exactly what you want. So that may be helpful for a case like this.
The only implication I have with that, Mark, is the names are going to be random.
Sorry?
So right now those names are hard coded as Mark this. He may have like 10 or 20 different teachers, and those names may change.
No, I don't though.
And that's where I think a stamp might be.
But the particular thing is we want to actually state, refer to specific values of specific people, in which case the hard-coded path is what we want. You could also, if you wanted to say the range of values, minimum, maximum, you could compute those, assuming everyone's in the same container.
Well, no, I mean,
But
this is definitely a much easier. I get that it's hard coded, but it's a much easier process and something that I can implement immediately. I frankly didn't know that you could insert expressions that way.
that's why you need to come
That
to.
just came in like 10.1 or something like that.
Yeah, it's I
pretty
believe it's
new.
Tinderbox 10. That's why you can't miss a meetup.
Well, I'm here, aren't I?
Yep.
They're both helpful. Michael, your method has a lot of legs to it that I can see it growing for me. This one will get the job done immediately. So they're both useful to me.
Yeah. And Michael's is much more flexible for export, and you certainly want to use that if you're like doing a gorgeous report.
Yeah. Right now I'm finishing something up.
Or the names are random, right? If the names aren't hard coded, the names can change or are random. That's where I think the alternative method is more flexible.
In this situation, I'm dealing with a small enough data set, but because I have to testify eventually on what I'm doing, I just don't want error. I don't want one error in there. And we have other ways that we've done it in the past. They're very time consuming. This, I really like this. Um, Last question then. The data coming to me is in the form of a PDF, unfortunately, and it's tabular. Um, are there any tools? I have one tool that I use, PDF Pro. I have to see how reliable it is. But does anyone have any suggestions for taking tabular PDF data and turning it into spreadsheet data so I can then populate the attributes?
I'm sorry, I missed that. Can you say it again?
Yeah, in other words, I have a page of a PDF table. I want to populate the attributes. Well, I can't go straight PDF into an attribute, I don't think. Um, and so I need an intermediary such as a spreadsheet, and then I'll grab the value pair columns of data and then populate my attributes that way. But getting it from a PDF into a readable format, are there any suggestions?
It's difficult. Mark,
I
sorry, go
would
ahead.
reach first for just copying the table and pasting it into Numbers or Excel, whichever you like better.
Okay, so
And
just
and it might work. If it doesn't work, it's not a disaster. But just doing that, and if that works, and the first row is the column heads, and they might make decent attribute names, just paste it into a Tinderbox view, and you're done.
okay.
But probably I'd go to uh, Excel or better yet, Numbers, and see how it goes.
Okay. This has really been
I,
helpful. Thank you.
I just say for Bruce, don't be surprised if it doesn't work. It's not your fault, and you haven't chosen the right tool. There's a whole market of people who have to do this at work, and they often have to build a tool for every single document. The problem is down to the way the PDF was created, and there's stuff all you can do about it. By the time it's come to you, you get what you're given. So I would thoroughly accord Mark's suggestion. If it works, great, and otherwise, well, you just got to go and do it the hard way. It's a pain. It shouldn't be that way, but that's just because PDF was never intended for this sort of use.
Well, I guess the issue
Mm-hmm.
is if the OCR layer was generated at the time the PDF was created, then I'm in pretty good shape. If I'm using another tool to capture the OCR, to create an OCR layer, that's where I've noticed that there will be, a 5 will turn into a 2, for example. And I can't obviously, well then, I can have that, but then I have to go back through and just very carefully check it. So that's okay. This absolutely moves me forward, and I appreciate the time on this. And Dave, to your comment, fortunately, I have no idea what your own aggression score is, but it wasn't a rating. These are teacher ratings of students, of a particular student. And just to give you all a nothing, it's a legal case that I'm involved in where a student had the crap beat out of them for being gender fluid, and the school did absolutely nothing about it, and so I've been piecing together what level of trauma the student has at this point from that point in time. And what's very sad is that the teachers are rating the student as being off the charts in some, I mean, 4 standard deviations above the norm, if that, it makes any sense. And yet the school has no plan. No, the teachers don't even know that something happened to the student. And yet they have this motionless, inhibited student in their class and just kind of figure they're not very motivated. So it's a very frustrating case in that way, if you will. And now that I have all the data, now I'm putting the report together. So
But Bruce, let me
anyway,
tell
so
you
this
how
is
important.
very,
Let
sorry?
me tell you how important your job is. When I was in first grade, one of my teachers said, "He's too creative, too imaginative, no touch on life. Let him sit in the back of the room and just be happy, but he'll never make anything of himself. He's got no touch on reality." And that's when my mom pulled me from the school and got me connected with somebody like you and put me into a different school, because that teaching environment was just, back in the day, it was just like stick them in the back of the room and they'll just be simple. So
Well,
the type
these
of
are
work you're doing is really, really important.
You know what, Michael? These are my favorite kind of cases because I'm relentless in getting the data. And the school, in this case, the school is 100 miles away from Los Angeles. And when I wrote the teachers requesting information, one teacher wrote me back and said, "You'll have to show up here and show your credentials. I don't do anything by email." So the amount of pushback I've had has been quite incredible. But at this point, I've broken through. I have the data that I need, and now just have to put the report together. So anyway, thanks for listening to me. It does, however, I just want to say it does
All right.
take things like Tinderbox, and it's going to save me hours as a result of what you've all showed me today. And we're going to have greater accuracy. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, another tool to help, which I find sometimes does a better job than Excel or numbers, is Obsidian. Obsidian does a really good job of converting information, like tables and such, into Markdown or into headings. So if you grab Obsidian and try pasting your PDF table into an Obsidian file, you'll get a pretty clean. You might get a pretty clean Markdown table, which you then can bring into Tinderbox and then easily parse. So that's something else we can play with on the side.
Thank you. I'm actually pulling numbers up right now, and I'm going to try pulling one of these files in to see what happens. So anyway, I'll fade into the background.
Beautiful. Okay. Anybody else have any other comments, thoughts, topics, questions that we want to cover? Mr. Anderson.
I just said I'll put it out there if there's if anyone has questions. Hopefully it's self-explanatory from the stuff I put in the forum, but I've sharpened up the stuff I did with making footnotes just recently, and I just wondered if anyone had any questions on that. Sometimes the questions are easily asked live.
I think it'd be great if you could demonstrate it to somebody, because you last time you did the footnotes was a couple months ago, and I suspect a lot of us have forgotten about it.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. Give me a second.
Maybe you could demonstrate it again, and
Yeah,
then while
yeah.
you're pulling that up, let's make sure we leave some time. I want to show the Fidel example too before we leave. I thought that one was particularly cool.
Sorry, I'm trying to be good and not open it.
Actually, given that yours is a little more complex, let me do the
Okay, sure. Yeah, fine.
example first, and then we'll go to you, because then we'll wrap up today with yours. All right. So in A and scene B, and what he wanted to be able to do is click on a drop-down list, and if he's already assigned Catalyst to a scene, he didn't want that theme, I guess, or beat is what they call it, to show up. And he only wanted to have one theme per scene. So what we did is, if you go in here and click final image. So I'm gonna click final image, and you'll see what happens here is the beat applied to the scene is now a final image. And when we go look at the list for what's available, you'll see that Catalyst has now been put back and final image is now gone. And the way we went about implementing that was actually, it turned out to be pretty easy. What we did is we created a list of items, which is his beat list. And we created a rule that said, go collect all of the children of this note. And so that way, the beat list available would have all the available notes that were available. Likewise, what we do is we go down and look at the scene, and we say, when the rule running against the scene is essentially a stamp. So we're saying every time you run this rule, go apply this stamp. And then if we look at the stamp, so I don't have my things folder in, so let's go add that in real quick. We'll go look at the stamp. And the stamp of that beats is essentially this. And so all we're doing when that stamp is applied is it's moving the notes automatically between folders. So when when you pick through and it's very similar to what we just did with Bruce. When you pick from the available list, go ahead and grab that beat, move it to the beats applied, and then recycle one if it was already in the list. And so, and I'll share this file so where people going a bit later. But this code is essentially exactly what we just did with Bruce, using the dot each, stepping through the values of our particular note, and then depending on the conditions that we have applied, moving those notes in between these lists. So if you look down here, you'll see the beats list folder that's available and those that are used. So if we were to create like a scene B or scene C, and then go and apply one, you'll notice that we'll grab B story, and you'll notice that B story because of these stamps, B story gets moved out of the available list and then put into the used list. And then if you were to go and say, no, what we actually want to do is put B, you want to put the it's like bad guys here. You'll see bad guys gets moved in, and then the final image gust. And so, again, this is another example to really very simply leverage the capabilities of the development environment that Tinderbox has given us to be able to create pretty simple applications. I'll share this file so you guys can play with it later, but you can walk through that and get a sense of what's going on with that. Does anybody have any questions there? I'm happy to share. Otherwise, let's let Mr. Anderson give his review.
I have one very quick follow-up question, maybe for Mark. I just tried what you showed me on inserting expressions. It worked like a charm. The question is, when I want compound values in the expression, so I can put the / and that will give me both expressions. Can I do anything else, either insert anything else like an equal sign or something, any kind of text within the expression? So kind of like what concatenate is in a spreadsheet. Do you follow what I'm asking?
You can, the expressions are just like the things that you might type on the right side of an equal sign in an action or in the parentheses of an if. So you could say aggression divided by social problems and get the ratio. But if you want to construct a complicated string, you probably want to do it with several separate expressions, the way I did it in my example.
Okay.
Mark, it begs the question, can you use a function as the expression?
Yes.
So that's one, probably not dive down that rabbit hole, but put that as a marker of one to circle back to, because it's a nice example of where, even if you think functions are way beyond you, you might actually possibly want to do it. But let's put that on the side for another meeting, because I think that might be interesting. Does that answer your question?
I think, Mark, I apologize. I think that I missed how you put in the, I see how to do it within the sentence and the values. So that's all you did, is you just had a different expression following a different part in the sentence. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. And and that'll work. That absolutely will work, and that's a time saver as well. Okay, let me turn it back over to others. Thank you.
So hopefully, someone can put the thread up in the chat if they want for this, but this is something that's rumbled along for a while, and it's something that I finally figured out how to do. But the starting provocation was, can I export a page or preview a page that has the footnotes to an article and actually see them in the article? And to demonstrate this fact, so here's a bit of Seuss. There are some footnotes. I'm sorry if they're not particularly obvious, but use one here, there's one here, there's one here. I'm looking at the preview at this point, but you'll notice they're sequentially numbered. And if I click on them, it actually takes me down to the bottom of the page. And if I click on a back button, it'll take me. So there's some using just a bit of HTML to take us backwards and forwards. No JavaScript involved. And so we can have a look and see how this is done. It involves something for which probably most people don't play around with, but it's built into the export. And in the early days of Tinderbox, there were macros. And essentially what I'm doing is, this is a bit of export code. So when I preview the note, Tinderbox goes and looks for the macro called add footnote. After the next comma is its first input. Here I'm using my apologies, I'm using an ID. I could use a name if it's unique or a path. And this is being passed into the code that's shown here. I don't propose to go through it in detail because you can look at that in slow time. The thing is to just understand what's going on here. But essentially, it's the number here is actually the footnote here. So I've made a footnote note, not using the Tinderbox method. So I have a folder called footnotes, really just so they're all in one place. I'm calling them the sort of word before the footnote symbol. Again, it doesn't really matter what you call it. That's one of the reasons I'm using the BID, because I don't really want to have to bother too much about what the footnote is called. The key thing is that the footnote in the note needs to know where needs to know which footnote it relates to. And basically, as it exports, it makes a link. So it makes a little span, which is the span is here. And it says, right, go and look for an element on this page with this marker. And I'll explain in a second how that marker comes to be. And the other thing it does is there is a footnote counter in each note. So we start at 1, and as the macro is evaluated, it runs a little action export, which says, find the footnote counter and increment it by 1. So when we get to the way, so this will be footnote 1, this will be footnote 2, this will be footnote 3, and so on. Another thing I've done, just in case it's useful to people, is that the footnote that the macro that I've defined only takes one input. So anything after the last input, the macro doesn't worry about. But what I've done here is I've put a link to the note, because it might be you're working a large document, you've got your footnotes somewhere else, you might be in a map or something, and they're somewhere else, they're not immediately to hand. And you might think, oh, wait a minute, what did I write in this footnote? So the trick here is I've actually added the footnote's name. It doesn't really matter actually what that text is. The important thing is I made a normal Tinderbox text link from here to this note, and you'll see a little inbound link, and that's what's causing that. In this example, I'm not doing that. So, for instance, if I find one with eggs, if I look at I think it was that one. You know, there's no inbound link, and that's the difference. Again, what I just tried to do is to offer you some things that you can play around with that suit your file for working the best. What the template does is the first thing it does is it resets the footnote counter, because otherwise, each time you previewed, it will use the last footnote counter. So if we had 3 footnotes, the next time you previewed it, your footnotes would number from 4 to 6, which is really not helpful. So we just reset that. And then when we get to the end of the text of the document, said, are there any occurrences of add footnote? An assumption here is that you're not going to have that string occurring anywhere except in the macro that we were just looking at. And if we do, insert the value of this, which might look a bit odd, but what I'm doing here is instead of basically trying to put stuff in an attribute and add it, what I've done is I've encapsulated everything I want inside a function. And the function, lo and behold, is down here. And so we're saying create footnote list. So it's calling this function. And the function goes away and says, right, get the list of footnotes, which is here. And this will just iterate through and find out how many essentially how many footnotes there are. Then we come back, and then I start building. So that what you see in orange here is effectively just literal static HTML code that I'm going to insert into the template as part of the output. And then where the list items actually occur, I call another function, which is this one down here, that section there. It uses the list that we made via the get list of footnotes, and you'll see in each here. So and then I'm going to loop through, and for each item, again you'll see some code in orange. So that's basically static bits of text I put in there, and I'm using the counter that you recall I said we were incrementing. So this uses this works on the logic that the anchor that you put into the text will have the same number as the item you create. So the first footnote will be superscript 1. The first item in the footnote list will be 1. And then basically I make the necessary code for the footnote. So in this case, I'm just literally taking the text of the footnote note and inserting it, and then I'm creating a little backlink. So when I click that, it just takes me back. It uses a hash sign type jump link, which is a way you can move around inside a single HTML page between different markers. And it is as simple as that. And the net result is that we can go to a page and I can click on a footnote, I can go down and I can click on the backlink, which takes me back to where it was. This extra text there is simply to prove the point that in case you had a big screen, that you actually saw the page move. It just gives you confidence that the system works. And also, if you have a text with no footnotes, it will still work. Nothing breaks. Before I go on, are there any questions at this point?
How do you obscure the Tinderbox internal link in the export?
And right, let me just go back to here. So what you're saying is, what you mean this bit here? Because there's no link. What's happening here is in the text, I'm adding an internal link in the page. So perhaps it's easier if I go to the output. So for the first, where are we? Well, here's footnote 2. That's footnote 2. So I've inserted a span called of a styling class footnote anchor. I've given it an ID of footnote anchor FNA _2 because it's the second one in the note. And I'm linking, when I click on that 2, it's going to go to an anchor called FN _2. So I'm using the same number, which I'll show you in a moment, further down the page.
Well, I think let me interrupt you for just a
Yeah.
second. The link I just saw is within the argument for the macro is what it looked like. Is that
Sorry,
is that-
yeah, right. So yes, this was me experimenting with the fact that, so I'm writing, I may have lots of pages, lots of articles, I'm using lots of footnotes. All the footnotes are stored somewhere else. So I can't see what the footnote says, but I'm in this article. So what would be an easy way for me to be able to both link to that and it not show up in the export? So the trick here is, the first part will be familiar. So I just make a normal Tinderbox links. The trick is that the add footnote macro only expects one input. The commas basically delimit. So you open a do command. The first bit is the name of the macro, comma, first argument. I could then close that out with a close parentheses and a caret, and it would all work. The trick here is, I know that Tinderbox, that the macro will ignore this because it says, I don't know what to do with this. I got an extra input. I don't care. So it's just a little trick I stumbled across that allows you to have the affordance of possibly being able to go and find the footnote. I hasten to add, I haven't done anything about trying to come back, but you could probably find a similar sort of method. But it was just trying to think through the practical problems. Each time you implement part of this, you think, well, that's great. So I've now done I've solved this bit, but I can now see there's another part of the problem, which leads me to the demo that I took from this, because I'd gone through this and I was talking with Michael the other day about it, and it came to me, well, of course, this is fine, but actually it's more likely that you're going to be exporting a page that's created from multiple notes. And if you think about some of Michael's reports, there are many, many notes. So essentially, if we collected all those footnotes and put them at the end, essentially, I suppose you might think of them as like endnotes in a book. So can we do that? Well, it turns out, yes, we can. We have to do things slightly differently. Let me find, where's the other? So this was just a logical building out from the first method. So I've essentially taken my same source notes. I didn't need all the padding text now because we're going to run all these things together. But I've changed it. So I have a new macro that works slightly differently. I won't go into the exact detail of it, because you can pick that apart by looking at the demo. But it's probably easiest to see the effect if I just show you, if I export here the whole of, if I preview as a proxy for exporting the container of all these notes, lo and behold, we've got footnotes starting at 1, and then it numbers 2, 3 into. So each time you go past one of these, we're going into a different node. So the numbering is going across all the content of these, and I've allowed for further nesting. So it's actually tracking the descendants. So the code is essentially numbering by traversing its way down the outline, which seems to be hopefully the most logical way, or the most intuitive way that would map what we'd expect. I can have things that don't have footnotes. I built in a test that basically will, if you've got a note in there so there's a note here that is set to not export, so it doesn't actually show up. Just to prove the point, if I go back to here, hide that, turn off, if I make it now export, lo and behold, it turns up and the numbers still work. So in this demo, I've tried to build in a number of the logical edge cases that you hit, because the classic thing is you make that and you think it's job done, and then immediately you find that you want to add something that now essentially breaks, what you had works, it just doesn't work in the scenario where you want it to. The same principle broadly applies here, but this time we're using the envelope and letter method. So I've got one main export template, that then calls footnotes, calls children that then call their children. And that's the way it reads across the outline. So you'll be familiar with this in a number of things. For instance, that's how all the ATB ref pages broadly are made. If you look at the sitemap, for instance, that's, I don't know, 2,000 entries in one web page, and it's all just done with a cascading template set like that. So in this case, again, learning from the previous demo, I've wrapped as much code as I can in functions. So when I look at the template, I haven't got loads and loads of action code. So I can, this makes, for my mind, it's easier to look at the HTML for the page you're building. But so what's happening, we do a little bit of mise en place at the top of the screen, and I'll come to in a moment to explain what that is. Then we go through and we basically call any children. And when we get to the end, we check if the code has detected any footnotes along the way, because of course it doesn't know till it's got to the end. There might be nothing except in the last of 100 notes it's got to cascade through. So as I go along, I check and I set a Boolean if I find a footnote. And then we, as before, we go and we call a function that makes all the footnote. And then the last little job is I reset all the counters. In fact, I reset the counters at the beginning and the end. So there's no chance of coming back and tripping over a used counter. Plus the fact that if you were working on a very large document and you had a lot of footnotes, if I didn't clean up at the end, you'd be saving all the contents of the footnotes somewhere, possibly in an attribute. And that's just dreck you don't need. So it's just tidying up as you go. So if I just go to the footnote functions, it's broadly the same start. We call a function that starts building the output. No, actually, that's the wrong. It's not the first one, is it? I've changed the order. So we're main page action. So main page action, I think, is here. So we start. First thing we do is we check, because we start on the container page. We check the container doesn't have any footnotes, and if we do, we start making a list of information that we need to build a footnote list. So whereas before we just did it in one file, now we've got to go through all the exporting files. If they have footnotes, build up some information, and then essentially I can do the same shtick as before, and I can, so for each footnote I'll build out an item, which then becomes the footnote at the bottom of the list. Something else I did, again, after talking over the earlier model, I put some notes in the bottom of the library telling somebody what you might need to move this. And to that end, I've also, in this version, made some things that, for instance, will go and make you the user attributes that are needed, because we can do that. I can add the stamp code, because we can do that. I can create the configuration note that we need to store the values of things like, what's the latest footnote number as we go, because obviously as we're going from note to note to note during the export, we need essentially something on the side, on the sort of jotter, to record the running numbers. And I do that with this note here, config note. The things that you can't automate for transfer at the moment is there is no way that I can find that you can export or save the code of a macro. So you basically, the code's there. What I have done in this demo is I actually copied this code into a note specifically so that if you wanted to take this and put it into your own document, I've tried to make it as simple as possible with the fewest number of moving parts. Don't forget, when you're moving in any information, especially notes with prototypes, even if the prototype that you want, the prototype that you're using in the source document may exist in the document you're going to paste into, but always check after pasting a note that it is actually using the prototype you thought it was. There is more depth than that in ATBRF if you want to get into it. It's just that Tinderbox quite reasonably can't assume that just because you have a prototype that's named the same in two different documents, that it is actually the same. So if you copy a note and its prototype and paste it in another Tinderbox, that assignment will work. If I had a person note in one document and a person prototype, and then in another document I had the same prototype, if I copy my person note to a new document, it won't necessarily pick up the prototype as you might assume it would. So it is there for a reason. It's just one of those things you need to check yourself. But otherwise, hopefully this demo goes a bit further than the last one in making the whole thing more modular. So you can take this, put in your own document and experiment, such that when you preview, you actually get, right at the end, we've now got a full set of endnotes. So this is only 5 notes, but what I envisaged is, for instance, I can envisage something like one of Michael's very large reports doing exactly this, and essentially having an endnote section. And if you're reading it in HTML, you'll actually have a backlink to the use of the footnote. What isn't in there, what I haven't attempted to do, is to have multiple links to the same footnote. I'm sure it's possible. It would just take, like all these things, it will just take some thinking through the edge cases. But at the moment, if you have a large number of files you're going to export as a composite page, and they have footnotes, you should be able to use the code that's here. It's on the forum, and that broadly is it. Unless there are any questions. I'll take silence as good. Okay, well, back to Michael then. You're muted, sir.
Good. So, by the way, as a side note to this, I've been able to judiciously steal, plagiarize, however one wants to use the term, work from Mark Anderson here, and use the same general premise for doing footnoting, for figure numbering and figure referencing. So if anybody's interested, so Mary Beth, as an aside, I just finally got that working yesterday. So so now what you can do is, if you've got notes that are referring to figures that you're using in your report, you can use this methodology to then automatically number your figures throughout an entire document or report, as well as automate the referencing of those figures. So we'll say like see figure 1.1, and then under the figure would say figure 1.1 plus its caption. And so using that same function, macro functionality that Mark just explained, you can do that with figure numbering too. A little complex, but it's definitely doable. All right. So we got about 2 minutes left. Any other thoughts, comments, questions, ideas?
I'll just say congratulations.
Otherwise,
You've been working on that since about May.
Yeah, months. Yeah, and the other one I've been trying to work on for about 2 years, I finally figured out this morning, which was automated unlinking of notes based on their link type. So that finally got working too. I'll explain that next week. All right, everybody. So thanks, and we'll catch you next week. All right. Bye-bye.